Well, obviously you recognise who the third man was coming up here. He's not exactly anonymous today. Anyway, we have, as you can see...
By the way, this is my father.
And by the way, what an honour it would be to be his father, because I could have spent last night with...
A young lady almost took advantage of me last night.
I had to hold him back.
And he was the pimp.
And he wouldn't pay the fee. Anyway, we have to get... Let's be serious. On the right, Tommy Milner, ALMS champion. And winner of the GT class at the 24 Hours of Le Mans just 2 years ago. The only American driving for the Corvette team. A wonderful hope for the future of American sports car racing. Right, Tommy? And you're bigger than he is, which is even better. And on my, closer to me in the middle, is a man who we dragged away from perdition last night, Jacky Stewart, Sir Jacky Stewart, 3-time World Formula One champion, a man who drove all sorts of other cars, as you will find out today, some of them powered by Chevrolet engines, because obviously since this is Corvette Day, we're going to talk a little bit about Chevy. But Jacky, great to have you here.
Well, nice to be back. I came to Laguna Seca. I don't want to interrupt your applause. I came to Laguna Seca way back 1964 to drive a Lotus Cortina. It wasn't as well developed as it is today, but it was still a really good racetrack. And that was my introduction. I came back again the following year, then I drove Can-Am here. That was a Chevy engine for John Meekum, Parnelli Jones, myself, Walt Hanskin. Really the beginning of really good sports car racing in the United States, because the Lola cars and then later the McLaren cars really made what sports car racing, particularly Can-Am, turned out to be in the States.
Well, Mark Donoghue would have been here, of course, and David we saw last night. Roger Penske was driving still in those days.
No, he just missed that. He finished about 62 or 63. But Penske was a good racing driver, but an even better businessman. And, you know, he's won Indy something like 15 times. It's quite as an entrant.
But it's interesting that you, Jacky, and Graham Hill were the two rookies at Indy when you came over for that, in the Red Bull special, etc. Graham won the race. You broke down 8 laps from the end or something like that, but you were Rookie of the Year, right? And you still got the jacket.
Yeah, it was with trepidation that the Europeans were coming over to do the Indy 500, because it was so much an American event. I mean, it was apple pie and ice cream, Memorial Day weekend, and the crashes were horrendous. And every interview I did before I came over in Europe, all they showed were crashes. It was amazing. So we came with some concern. I drove for a man called John Meekum, who did a lot in Can-Am racing and went on to own the New Orleans Saints football team as well. He was a great sports supporter. I finished 6th in the race, but I was leading the race by 2 laps with 8 laps to go. Can you imagine? And the money that in these days, you know, for a Scotsman, I was in depression for about 5 years, and the Scottish economy has never recovered. But I got my trophy, which I have. I've got very few trophies. Most of my trophies I gave away when I retired from racing, but I kept my Rookie of the Year trophy, and it sits there, and it's an important one.
And you've got the jacket still, I think, as well.
I've still got yeah, because when you're a pace setter at Indianapolis, there's a pace setters club, you've got to lead the race for, I don't know, you've got to read it for 40 laps or something to qualify to be a pace setter. And I've got this gaudy yellow and blue leather jacket. It's the kind of thing, it's pretty crude, it's the sort of thing that he would wear. But I've got it. And one day...
I'd only wear it if you paid me to wear it, and you'd never do that.
You see, he's also Scottish. But I know, being a pace setter, I loved it. And, you know, 8 laps from the end to be 2 laps in the lead. Graham Hill and Jim Clark were second or third, so it was all Europe, all British, 2 Scotsmen and unfortunately an Englishman. And for that was a great introduction. I came back the next year and again was lying in second place when the same scavenge pump seized in the engine to bring the oil from the oil tank into the engine. The scavenge pump went, same as the previous year. I was ahead of AJ at the time. He went on to win the race. So I kind of decided not to do it again. So
now, Tommy, I would imagine for you, a sports car driver, Le Mans is like the holy grail, right? What was it like the first year you went there, and then to go with Corvette, the only American in the team, and to win? And I know that towards the end of the race, you were having a lot of instructions on the phone from Binks and everybody else. Tell the crowd a little bit about that.
I mean, Le Mans, my first year Le Mans was 2006. I went there, that was my first sort of year really professionally racing. And went there with the Panos team, and but I obviously knew about Le Mans and knew the history and everything and knew how important that race was, but I didn't really understand how that entire country, Europe in general, basically embraces that race for that week. And you have something like 300,000 people there over those couple days, and that was sort of the first time when I felt like a rock star, so to speak, because there's literally for the driver's parade on a Thursday. You get to ride in these very old vintage cars and drive around the old part of Le Mans there, and there's literally 40,000 people, from little kids to your grandmother out there. They're all screaming at you for your autograph, and that year we were throwing just some of our hero cards, our autograph cards out to the fans, and that was the first time for me where I really felt like, me driving a race car was special, so to speak. So that was the race itself that year was not very good. I didn't even get a drive in the race. I walked out of the garage to get in the car for the first time, and I had all my equipment on ready to go. And that year there was one other Team Panos car, and I heard that one go by once, and I thought, okay, well the next car should be our team car. And then I heard that same orange Panos go by again, and the lap there is about 4 or 5 minutes, and I walked out with my entire crew. So there's probably 10 people walking down the pit lane and myself, and I walked down just a little bit, one pit lane down to kind of get a good run into the car. And so after about 5 or 6 minutes, and I realized there was something wrong, I looked back where I had just seen probably 10 people, and literally they were all gone, and the garage door was halfway shut. And there I was standing out there by myself, my first time at Le Mans, never got in the car. The car had actually was not fueled properly, I guess, in the last pit stop, so we were out of gas going into Indianapolis. But so a great first experience going to Le Mans there, but then didn't end very well. I went back in 2007 again, but then I went back in 11 with Corvette, my first year with Corvette racing. And over there in France at Le Mans, the French fans, everybody over there really loves the Corvettes because the big, loud, thunderous V8 you hear resonating this weekend, that was different for them, and you get to see some of that history here today. Those cars were different to what they were used to. The cars that were basically built for that kind of race, and that still holds true today. I mean, we have the most sort of iconic sound there at the race, and that year 2011 was able to win the race with my teammates Antonio Garcia and Olivier Beretta, and that was very special that year. That was the 100th anniversary of Chevrolet. So Mark Royce, sort of the VP of Chevy, he was there for that. And growing up, my dad owned a race team and in sports car racing, and he won Daytona and Sebring and Watkins Glen and all these big races in the U.S. But he never had a chance to go to Le Mans, and he was there that weekend with me. So it was cool to have him there and experience that. And myself, I mean, that is, if I stop racing today, which I hope that doesn't happen, but if I stop racing today, I could look back and say I won Le Mans, and that is, for me, growing up racing sports cars, there's nothing better.
Jacky, you drove sports cars in your early years because, after all, Grand Prix drivers drove other cars in those days, as well as Formula One. Things have changed now, and people specialize, and they don't do all those things. And your first attempt there, I think, well, you went once, didn't take part, but then you drove the Rover BRM, which was a very special experience, I think.
Yes, I went as a reserve driver for Maranello concessionaires, which were the biggest private entry team, non-works Ferrari team. And I was reserve driver for Joe Bonny, Graham Hill, Innes Island, and another driver. So I qualified the car, ran the car, but they all stayed fit for the rest of the race, so I didn't get to drive, which was rather nice because I had a good night's sleep every night. I didn't have to get up at some silly hour in the morning to drive a racing car. And we were staying in a 3-star Michelin Guide hotel, which is very important for a racing driver. You still have to learn about that. So I went back the following year to drive, of all things, a gas turbine car, helicopter engine in a Rover BRM. The car looked great, but I mean, it was unbelievably slow. And anyway, there was no braking, no engine braking at all. You know, you took your foot off the gas and the turbine kept running. And it, you know, it was only the brakes. So, you know, in any kind of car we all drive, you shift down, you get engine braking. And this thing, you had nothing at all. And the brakes weren't all that good in those days. And I said, what do I do if we have a brake problem? Because occasionally we'll have, you know, brake balance bar break, you'll maybe have only front wheel brakes or rear wheel brakes. What do you do in this case? Oh, well, I don't know. I said, oh, Jesus, I'm going to drive Le Mans 24 hours and you don't know what I can do if there's a failure. He said, well, you just get it down as slow as it'll go and then you put your foot out the door. You know, the guy, the designer, actually said that, and God be my witness. And it was at that time I sort of lost confidence in the team. But Graham Hill was the number 1 driver for BRM, I was the number 2 driver. And we tossed up. And the funny thing was, we tossed up, whoever won the toss had to drive the first stint. Because we really didn't want to drive it. But the deal was that if that happened, you would drive it into the sandbank at the end of Mulsanne Straight, because we couldn't bear going round for 24 hours in this device. And you know, Graham, of course he didn't mean to do it, but sure as hell, he went in the first lap right into the sandbank at the end of Mulsanne, and it swallowed a whole bundle of sand, and it took the edge off of all the turbine blades. So it meant that instead of revving at 82,000 revs, that's what the turbine was revving at, we had to do 50,000, which meant that I got passed on the Mulsanne Straight by a Triumph Herald. And Jochen Rindt, who was one of my best friends with Maston Gregory, an American driver, was driving the winning 250 LM Ferrari, lapped me every 3 laps, can you imagine? And the bloody thing lasted until the end of the race. So we finished 11th, can you imagine? But we were the first British car home, which doesn't say a lot for Britain's sporting career at that time.
Apparently, one of the things that happened in that was that as well as the edges being taken off the blades, which restricted your revs to 63,000, and towards the end of the race, 80 horsepower, that's all you had apparently. One of the mechanics, they had zips on they had buttons on their overalls, and a button fell into the turbine. And after that, they insisted that they have zips on the on their overalls for then on in. But of course, you never drove it again there.
Well, I always had buttons on my fly, actually, and in that race, I put 7 buttons into the turbine. Nothing negative seemed to happen. Just bad luck, really.
Now, the difference between today at Le Mans and then is, even if you were driving something really good like a Ferrari or a Porsche 917 or something like that, it was an endurance race. I mean, you were given instructions, you didn't drive flat out, there was always a little bit of nursing, I'm not saying nursing so going slow, but looking after the equipment. Whereas now, it's a sprint, isn't it, Tommy?
Yeah, today it is. The cars are so refined now and so bulletproof with their reliability that we literally drive every lap as hard as we possibly can go. Because if you don't, somebody else will, and that car will last, and they'll win the race. So there's definitely times, obviously, when strategy comes into play, and you know, maybe you aren't driving at 100% for maybe an hour of the race or 2 hours of the race, but we are literally driving as hard as we possibly can. To Jacky's point there, you know, nowadays we have paddle shift in the car and things like that, and when we had an H pattern or sequential, if we were way behind, and as he kind of said, you know, if you were 10 laps down and you had no, or, well, at Le Mans, 10 laps is nothing, but if you were 50 laps down and you had no chance to do well, the drivers always got together and kind of said, okay, well, so if it's that bad, if we're that far behind, one of us has to blow the motor up or do something to the car so we can just end this now. Because there's nothing worse than being, you know, behind, you know, let's say 2 hours in the race and you literally have no chance and you just drive around for 22 hours, you know, just because you have to. So the drivers always, you know, try to just figure it out and say, okay, it's your turn now to blow this thing up. And we can't do it anymore. We can't, there's nothing, all the controls and the computers and stuff like that, now we can't do that. So.
Okay, Tommy, let's have a little news here. Did you ever do that?
I've never been tasked with that. But we do have one thing that usually happens. If a driver gets in the car and drives around, something sometimes, you know, goes wrong with the car on the racetrack, and it might be minor enough where you don't want to talk about it so much. And you get out of the car, and then the next driver cops in the car, your teammate, and then he goes out, and then that becomes a bigger problem. The car blows up, and we call that pulling the pin on the grenade. So you just drop the grenade in your seat, and you say, "Yep, there you go, have fun with that one." And then 20 minutes later, the motor, something goes wrong, and you know, then he gets all the blame to start with, and then you slowly kind of creep in. You tell him, "Hey, actually, I think I caused that one. Sorry."
I just remember I drove at Le Mans another time. I drove a GT40. But I didn't. It was in 1966 when they won the race, when Ford Motor Company won the race, and I was retained by Ford at that time. I've been under contract with Ford. I was there for 40 years. I was under contract with Ford Motor Company and won all 3 of my world championships with Ford. But I'd raced the 7-litre GT40, and I didn't get to do the race because you do the April one, you know, you do the test in April? Yeah. Oh, no. They'd won in April, and you had to do a certain speed before you were selected to the race. And I drove this, I mean, it was very fast, 240 mile an hour down the straight. And I was going down the straight, and it was a gull wing. You know, the door. The bloody thing, the driver's door, suddenly blew up. And I took off. And I got, you know, I was well above the racetrack. And then suddenly, luckily, the door blew off, you know, because of the pressure. And the thing landed on all 4 wheels. And it was just fine, but at 240 miles an hour, I know that's not fast with you young drivers today. In my day,
that's fast, no matter what, 200.
I remember Vic Elford, you know, when Vic Elford drove the 917 Longtail at Le Mans. It was geared to do 250 miles an hour. It didn't quite make it. It got to about 248. And the other drivers, Brian Redman and others who are, many of here, some of them are here today, felt that the thing was a little uncomfortable because it was weaving around all over the straight. And so Vic apparently said, well, even in the rain, it didn't move too much. After all, I'm a rally driver. I'm used to a little bit of motion, you know, and it would weave all the way down the straight like this, an extraordinary sight. Jackie, you also drove a 250 LM in Australia for David Mackay and won a 1,000-kilometre race in Surfers Paradise or something like that, didn't you?
Yeah, it was a 12-hour race. Drove 275 LM that an Australian bought the car and ran it in Australia, and it's now owned by Ralph Lauren. It's his pride, and he had it at the Louvre in Paris. Ralph Lauren went to the Louvre last year, which is of course the greatest museum in the world, and they were honouring the car and got Ralph to send all his really good cars over to the Louvre to be on a display. I think it lasted 3 months, and he had the LM on that, so the car's still there. I drove it in Montauk a few years ago. Ralph asked me over for lunch, and I drove the car. He wouldn't drive it. I don't know why. I suppose it was so expensive. He was worried. There's not too much money now, Ralph Lauren, and he must have been hard up. If I had broken it, maybe I would have had to pay for it. Which would have
that would have been a trick.
Terrible.
Tell me, so what's happening with the new C7? Have you driven the C7 on the street, and is that going to be the basis of the next race car, do you think?
My first time driving the C7 was yesterday, giving hot laps to some people. So I haven't driven the street yet, but on the racetrack, it's a phenomenal car. That will be the basis of our car for next year, our C7R, which we'll start testing here soon and get prepared for next year with the new merged sports car series. We're obviously very excited that the C6 has been around for a while. There was a GT1 version of it and now the GT2 version of it. It's been successful in both. It's been a great car, but we're definitely looking forward to the next version and what that holds.
You got Jan Magnussen drives in your team, doesn't he? He used to drive for us. Jan Magnussen drove for Paul Stewart Racing and drove the Stewart Grand Prix car for the first season. We had to let him go in the end. He was wonderful in the formative classes of motorsport, single-seater motorsport. He beat my record in Formula 3. He beat Senna's record in Formula 3. He was an extraordinarily good driver in the formative classes, but for whatever reason at that stage in his life he just couldn't handle the pressure of Formula 1, and he just never made it. I thought he was going to be one of the biggest stars that I had ever seen. He was one of the best drivers I've ever witnessed anywhere, but he was good after the first third of the race. Once you get over the nerves of the first third, he wasn't a good qualifier, but then he was as fast as anybody else in the racetrack. So when you see him, say a big hello from here. He was a great guy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, F1's loss with sports car racing's gain. I mean, Jan has been a phenomenal teammate for me, and he's done everything that you can do in sports car racing. And he's always super quick. So maybe sports cars was more of his home there than Formula 1, where it's a little bit laid back in some ways.
Jackie, you then came to the States quite a lot when the Can-Am series started. You drove that L&M Lola, and you also drove one of the Chaparrals. Tell us a little bit about that, because not everybody has had a go in those cars, and the Can-Am series was renowned for power and glamour and speed.
Yeah, we had the L&M Lola, which was trying to compete against the McLaren. And frankly, the McLaren was way ahead. Eric Broadley, a lovely man, the creator of Lola cars and the designer, never quite got that car right. And it was a monster to drive. Very short wheelbase, which means it's very twitchy. A long wheelbase car is a lot more forgiving. You can take liberties with it. The short wheel is just too divey, points too quickly. And it was tough to keep up with the McLaren. Won a couple of races, finished second here to Peter Revson, I think it was. Won at Mont Tremblant and won in Mid-Ohio, I think. Then I gave up. Well, actually, I drove the Chaparral before I drove the Can-Am series. I drove the Chaparral at Watkins Glen, the ground effect car, the sucker. And it had this, behind you, this lawnmower engine, which was sucking the air from the side skirts, Lexan side skirts that went right down. The skirts went right down onto the track, unlike most girls' skirts that I've known. It went right down to the track, and then the air was sucked up, so the car was sucked onto the ground. Remarkable. And it was the first time I had to do left foot braking, because it was so fast that you hardly had to lift off at times. You had to brush the brakes to just get the thing to bite. Unfortunately, the lawnmower engine failed. Very noisy in the first place, and right in your ears. It was very noisy. And then it gave up. So unfortunately I didn't finish the race, but my Can-Am racing in America was great fun. In 71 that was. I didn't win the Can-Am. I think I was second in the Can-Am Championship, second or third, I can't remember. But I know that I travelled the Atlantic. That year I was working for ABC's Wide World of Sports with Jim McKay and the team, Keith Jackson and these people. I crossed the Atlantic 86 times that year and won the World Championship and, did all the other things. I had a thing called mononucleosis. If you've been to university, you're nodding, you know about it. It's when you're playing too much at night and trying to study and get through the exams, you get mononucleosis. I was almost dead with it, and I nearly retired because of it, because of the travel schedule with the time changes and everything. And that's why I gave up racing in North America. I gave up the Can-Am, did a McLaren. I had a McLaren contract for 72, and my duodenal ulcer then hemorrhaged again because of I was doing so much, and it was at the beginning of the commercial world of motorsport had no advertising on the cars for a great many years. Suddenly we were signing up with very large multinationals, so we were doing an awful lot of public appearances and television shows, and I was just run down. So I stopped racing over here at that time just because of the travel.
I asked you earlier on, Tommy, about that Le Mans win, that first Le Mans win, and you didn't tell me about, or tell all of these people about what was going on the radio, because you were going too fast, and I think that's quite interesting for people to hear.
So in 2011, that year, our teammates they led the race for about 14 hours of the race, and they had an accident with another car. And so they were out of the race, and we were in the hunt there, but we were 5th and 6th and sort of a lap behind them. And so after the accident, then all the weight then kind of went on our shoulders, and so we just sort of slowly kind of chipped away at the cars ahead of us, and with about four hours to go in the race, I got in the car, and we, at that point we were in 2nd place, and the Ferrari that was leading ahead of us, they were having a couple issues here and there. Like they would have a pretty quick lap and then a very slow lap. So they were dealing with something that was causing them issues. And as I got in the car, it started to sprinkle a little bit, which isn't a big deal, but it wasn't enough to put rain tires on. So I went out on slicks and with 4 hours to go. So now it's getting down to the wire a little bit, and now we need to really kind of push. And so I went out, and my first lap was fine, no problem, dry weather pretty much. And then the next lap it was raining a little bit more in different places, and Le Mans is such a big track that it can be raining in one corner, and then the next lap it's dry there completely and raining somewhere else. So I think we were about 2 minutes behind the Ferrari with 4 hours to go, and by the time that I was sort of getting my last stint there, we were within 30 seconds, and that's when the rain was the worst, and we were still on slick tires. So here I am, my first year with Corvette Racing, and all the weight on my shoulders. Mark Royce, the VP of Chevy, of GM Worldwide, was there, and he was watching this, and it's the 100th anniversary of Chevrolet. It's all these big anniversaries, and here I am now. I'm a 26-year-old kid driving for one of the best sports car racing teams in the modern day, and now everyone's. I can feel the pressure already. My crew chief Dan Binks was on the radio with me. He talks me through every lap with traffic and things like that. And with about 2 hours to go in the race, I was catching the Ferrari at quite a high rate of speed. I mean, at some laps it was 10 seconds a lap, and I just felt comfortable. I was in the zone. Everything was working well. I was just in tune with the car, and so I was just having fun. I was driving fast, and then Dan comes on the radio and says, "Tommy, you need to slow down. You're going too fast. The conditions are bad. People are going off everywhere. You need to slow down." And I came back on the radio and I said, "Okay, but just let me just drive. I mean, I'm in a rhythm right now. Just let me keep driving." So that was okay for about a lap or two, and I took another 8 seconds off the Ferrari again, and now I could see him. So now there's even more incentive for me to go faster and go faster. And the track's definitely getting worse and worse. And so again, it comes on the radio, and Tommy, you need to slow down. And I think the first thing I said to Dan was, because we have all these TV cameras in the pit lane there, I said, "Dan, it looks faster on TV. I'm not going that fast. I'm really," which that they still use that on me today. Whenever they see me, "Oh, Tommy, it looks fast on TV, right?" So I'm catching the Ferrari, and able to make the pass in the Ferrari, and still, while Dan is in the radio with me, "Tommy, slow down." And he's got Jim Miller, who's Brett Miller, who builds and designs the race cars for Corvette Racing. He's sort of the president of the company. He's there, and he's yelling at Dan to tell me to slow down, and everyone's now watching. There's a big crowd in the pit lane. So I passed the Ferrari, and so now I kind of tell myself, okay, maybe now I should go a little bit slower just to be sure. We have a fast car. So I go a little bit slower in the first chicane. I brake a little bit earlier, but I don't brake quite as hard as I normally would. And at that point, the rain was a little bit worse than the chicane there, so I got into the corner and I thought, ooh, I'm going too fast, so I needed to brake a little bit more. And I locked up the right front tire and I went straight to the first chicane there and over the curbs and kept going, which was okay. But the second that I got the car back on the racetrack, Dan came on the radio and he's yelling at me. He's like, Tommy, I am serious as a heart attack right now. You need to slow down. And at that point, I got the message pretty clear and was able to finish my stint and brought the car in the lead. And at that point, I've been driving for 4 hours, so I had to get out of the car according to the rules. And Antonio finished the race, but that was a very special moment for sure, one that I won't forget. To pass that Ferrari going down from Mulsanne to Indianapolis, it was a very, very cool experience for sure.
Still got a contract?
Still have a contract. Only because I won the race. If I had put it off after Dan yelled at me, I would have been done for sure, right there.
I don't know whether to stop for a minute because they're playing the national anthem over there, but I did want to ask Jacky about the Nürburgring race in the rain when you led the first lap by about 50 seconds or something, and the height of your crusade for safety, pouring with rain, fog, and you just left the field for dead.
Well, the Nürburgring, as many of you who are enthusiasts will know, is 14.7 miles per lap and 187 corners per lap in those days. They've cut a few corners short nowadays. Do you think we should stop for the national anthem? I think we should. I mean, here am I telling you.
Good idea, Jacky. Okay, we'll
if it were the British national anthem, we would have been up ages ago. Yeah, Nürburgring. You usually rented a car and then you learned the Nürburgring. And you took the car back to Hertz or Avis and the thing had bald tires and a few marks on it. But a great racetrack. In February, in front of the fire, the snow outside, you would dream about how wonderful the Nürburgring is. Bullshit. I mean, it is the... Every time I left my home to go to the Nürburgring, I looked in the rear view mirror and wondered if I'd ever come back, you know, looking at the house. Because I never did one more lap at the Nürburgring than I needed to do after I learned the Nürburgring. And that was a very wet race. It would never have been started today. They would never have started that race. You wouldn't have been able to see 50, 60 meters in front of you at certain parts of the racetrack. And there's a huge amount of, difference in altitude. And they started the race in conditions where they wouldn't have been able to see each marshal's post. It was just crazy in those days. The safety thing was abysmal, because in those days the racetrack hadn't been improved. There was no barriers. You would see a little Christmas tree, a tiny little tree, and you think, well, that's okay. If you went off here, you're not going to be into a heavy tree. It was actually the top of 100-foot tree, with a ravine down here, and you were only seeing the tip of the fir tree. And it killed more people than any other racetrack in the world. Every week, even to now, they kill about 1.5, the average is 1.5 persons a week they kill at the Nürburgring, because you're paying money to go round and you have huge accidents, motorcyclists and everything. Anyway, I led the race by, 15 or 16 seconds in the first lap, and I won it by over 4 minutes. There was only 13 laps, because of the huge difference in the length of the racetrack. But it was probably technically my best win. But looking back on it, it was at that time, that year, in fact, 68, that year we lost Jim Clark on the 7th of April. We lost Mike Spence on the 6th of May. We lost Ludovico Scarfiotti on the same weekend in June. And we were racing at Rouen on the French Grand Prix when Joe Slesser died on the same weekend, the 7th of July. And we were at the Nürburgring on the 7th of August. And the first question I asked when I came out the car was, is everybody all right? Because at the ring, you never knew. If somebody went off the road, they just disappeared. And I, in fact, closed the Nürburgring in 1970 because they wouldn't do. I was then president of the Grand Prix Drivers Association, and they didn't. We sent Jochen Rindt because he was German speaking, and we sent him with an absolute minimum of the things we needed to have changed for us to agree to race there. It was so dangerous, and they wouldn't do one of them. So we came out, and we didn't race there. It was a huge. I had life threats because the economy of the region was affected. They had 375,000 people go to that racetrack for the Grand Prix, because all the way around the racetrack they were in tents and living like that. So they did a few things, and then Nicky Lauda had his big accident there in 1976, and then they closed it for good. It's never been raced on in Formula One again. We let sort of silly sports car drivers drive it, but Formula One drivers don't drive it.
Thank you.
I have to say, I know that you did the 24 hours of the Nürburgring recently. Unfortunately, we don't have time to go on. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for both wearing your Rolexes. Thanks for being here.
That's